I've clicked onto the Global Tropical Overview for July the 25th local time in the West Pacific 2023. As is always the case in these videos, the thoughts expressed are mine alone, and when making decisions ahead of any tropical cyclone, especially ahead of Super Typhoon Doksuri, look towards your local weather office, local emergency management, and local tropical cyclone warning center. So across the tracks today, we're going to be staying in the West Pacific with Super Typhoon Doksuri, which has become a super typhoon in the past hours of the morning in the Philippines, but afternoon hours in UTC time. And this system is amazing to look at, and unfortunately, it has become a super typhoon as it is approaching Luzon. Now, the good news is it looks like the intensity has leveled off, at least for now, and it looks like there might be some signs that it may come down a little bit before it actually gets to the Philippines and Luzon and the Luzon Straits. But unfortunately, this system is so strong that it does not matter what intensity it comes in. Really, at the Philippines, it could come in 20 miles per hour weaker, and it would still be a significant storm. Once you get to this threshold of upwards of super typhoon, it really doesn't matter what the exact wind speed is. The winds are still going to be very damaging either way you look at it. Now here's the close-up infrared loop. And you can see overall the system looks pretty good. There are some imperfections that we can point out here. One that's obvious is the very lopsided structure in general, and I chose a bad color for that. The lopsided structure in general, you can see all the deep convection, it is wrapping around the eye, but for the most part, this is kept to the southern side of the eye. And this is from some wind shear that the system is dealing with. If we look at the water vapor loop, you can see one indication is that the outflow aloft is restricted. You can see it gets to about this point, but after this point, it can no longer expand further north. And if you look north of there, we have some streaming northerly flow, and this goes underneath the outflow layer. And if you look at thunderstorms north of the storm that are firing, you'll notice that their tops are getting sheared to the south, showing that this northerly shear is getting towards the storm. Alongside that lopsided structure I pointed out with the eye here with all the convection on the southern side, this is a factor of that. Now, it has clearly not been inhibitive in terms of strength. If we look at a microwave pass we got a few hours ago, you can see that this eye wall is still very strong, and perhaps some of these outer bands are helping to protect this inner core from that northerly shear, though this banding can still cause issues for the storm in terms of intensity. The banding features that we see here in the microwave pass, these can eventually turn into what's called an eye wall replacement cycle, where eventually you get especially in much stronger storms like this, you can get a secondary band of thunderstorm activity to form around the inner eye wall. And eventually throughout that process, it takes usually about 12 to 24 hours for it to take place. But eventually this outer ring will contract and it will degrade this inner eye wall structure, and eventually it will become the new eye wall. And in this process, the overall wind field does get larger. Alongside that, the winds will come down for a little bit of time, and in some scenarios, the winds will stay down, but in some cases, the winds can come back up. Now, we're not seeing many model solutions showing the winds coming up too much more after the eye wall replacement cycle, mainly because what I think might be happening is because the system is going into lower oceanic heat content, and the system is already so large, if it goes through an eye wall replacement cycle, it would be even larger, of course, than it is now, and it might be churning up colder water much, much quicker ahead of the eye. So when it actually gets to the warm water, or at least the eye gets there with the lower oceanic heat content towards Taiwan, it actually doesn't have too much warm water to deal with. That's what I think might be happening here on the modeling. Now, it is important to remember as well, with the size of the storm growing, the impacts of rainfall and storm surge and strong winds, they get greater with an eye wall replacement cycle. They can be, a little misleading in terms of being good news or bad news. These are typically bad news because of the increased size of the storm in general after these eye wall replacement cycles. And it is unfortunate that the system is already a super typhoon, because even if it does weaken, like I said, they say 20 miles per hour off of its current intensity, that's still a significant typhoon. That's a category 4 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. That is capable of bringing extensive damage to anywhere it hits. And unfortunately, this system is heading right for land areas in northeastern Luzon and the Luzon Straits, and especially in the islands north of the main part of Luzon. This is an extreme threat now for high winds that could exceed, you know, typhoon force, and we could be looking at perhaps close to super typhoon force here, winds on those islands. Storm surge that could be very high with the strong winds and the size of this storm, and heavy rainfall. We've seen some model depictions of 300 to 500 millimeters of rainfall across these islands and across portions of Luzon. So that's very important to remember. Even like I said, if with this eye water pleasant cycle, it will come down in intensity, and it looks like the system might be peaking right now. But it's not always good news when that happens. And unfortunately, regardless of what happens here, we're going to get a strong typhoon here in the northern Philippines. Now, here is the current track forecast with the infrared loop, and you can see overall we still look generally on track. We did have perhaps maybe a little bit of a south track in the track or in the actual forecast and actual track of the storm over the past day, but overall we're generally still looking at the storm coming in just northeast of northern Luzon and through the islands north of there. Now, I'm still waiting on the Pagasa advisory that comes out at about 5 in the morning local time. I am recording this at about 5:30 local time. I'm going to check now if that advisory has come out, mainly because I'd imagine we might see more. Yeah, okay, we do have a new advisory from them, and it looks like the watches and warnings have stayed pretty much the same here. So what you're seeing is pretty much the updated signal warning map, despite it being from the 2 a.m. advisory. So we have signal 3 warnings for a good portion of the Philippines. I'd imagine with time these would become signal 4 warnings as the system comes through, and their forecast remains generally the same. Here's their forecast. Now, this has changed a little bit on their newest forecast. I'm looking at it now. The forecast of a super typhoon here offshore of Luzon has been changed. This is now expected to be just a typhoon. I say just a typhoon, but this is still going to be around that border of typhoon and super typhoon as it comes through. And that makes sense with the current trends that I'm seeing on microwave imagery and on satellite of what I've talked about today. Now, as the system comes past the Philippines, we're going to be looking towards Taiwan as well for impacts. You can see there is still that potential for the system to come ashore, but keep in mind, like I said yesterday, even if the system stays south of the island, significant winds and significant rainfall is still likely. This is the HWRF model showing this. And now this HWRF is on the northern side of the envelope. I'm sorry for the blank frames there, but you can see it does have the storm coming towards Taiwan. But the main reason I'm showing you this model is because of the heavy rainfall that can be expected here as the system comes through. You can see with the higher terrain, let me get a better color here. With the high terrain in Taiwan, with all that onshore flow, you're getting very, very heavy rainfall from the typhoon, even if the center is south here. And keep in mind, even if it stays on the current forecast track and comes, say, down here south of the island, you'll still get that onshore flow. Maybe not as much rainfall as, say, models like the HWRF would show here, but you still get significant rainfall. Now, here's a GFS modeled rainfall, and you can see here across the islands north of Luzon and northern Luzon, we could see, again, 300 to 500 millimeters of rainfall. And in Taiwan, we've got areas of upwards of 500 millimeters plus of rainfall being shown on the models. Now, this is one model depiction. It's not guaranteed this will occur. Hopefully, we get away with this with not that much rainfall. But given the high terrain and how you'll have a lot of onshore flow as the system passes south, it's hard to believe that you wouldn't at least get out with a significant rainfall of perhaps over 200 millimeters here as the system passes through. Now, for China past Taiwan, again, the track intensity, or well, mainly the intensity, it does still depend on if the storm actually comes into Taiwan, if it stays on the northern side of this cone. If it has more land interaction, it would likely be much weaker if it does come into China after. Now, if it stays south, it could still be a significant typhoon. Now, it's important to note that we are expecting the system to weaken as it comes through here, and I talked about that earlier, and you can also see the large size. Now, for preparations ahead of this storm, in Taiwan, you really need to have your preparations done in this morning local time, as tropical storm force winds are almost to the island. And for China, I'd say have your preparations done by tonight, as the, again, tropical storm force wind field will be growing with that eye wall replacement cycle that could occur. Of course, I should mention that there's a possibility that that eye wall replacement cycle does not occur. These things are very difficult to predict, but given the current signs that we've seen and based on history, it does look like one is likely to occur with these banding features around the eye. Now, that is all that I've got for Typhoon Doksuri for now. I'll have the links that I had yesterday to all the local weather offices in the Philippines and Taiwan and China listed there alongside the Japan Meteorological Agency. But stay safe in the Philippines. I'll have future videos on this and some of the other systems around the world tomorrow and the rest of this week. But stay safe, and that's it for now. Thanks for watching.